Questions of much graver and universal interest occupy our minds today.
Hello, my name is Lieutenant Eric Shine. I'm a graduate of the United States Merchant Marine Academy at Kings Point. I come out of Kings Point with a naval commission, and I serve on special duty in the United States Merchant Marine as a federal maritime officer. Kings Point, or the United States Merchant Marine Academy, is a sister academy to West Point, Annapolis, the Air Force Academy, and yes, of course, the Coast Guard Academy. I am here to talk to you today about the Coast Guard as a rogue agency of the federal government that is carrying on numerous unconstitutional activities. As an example, the Coast Guard is carrying on, since 2003, the Coast Guard has self-declared itself to be a special branch of military. Traditionally, the Coast Guard has been a civil service law enforcement, police maritime law enforcement agency. Civil service means that all of the personnel, even in uniform, are civilians. And what has happened since 2003, shortly after the events of 9/11, the Coast Guard has moved into Homeland Security, and upon moving into Homeland Security, it has declared itself to be a special branch of military that can carry on civilian affairs and adjudicate it. Right now, the Coast Guard as not just a police force, this is like having the highway patrol not only pull you over and cite you with a summons or a ticket as far as law enforcement, but to where they are collecting the fines, they are collecting the fees, they are carrying on the trials and the adjudication, and carrying on any issues as to taking your license away from you rather than having the DMV or another agency do it. The Coast Guard as a branch of military is licensing civilian mariners, ship's captains, chief engineers, engineers, mates, issuing documentation to unlicensed crew members, whether they be able-bodied seamen or they call them qualified members of the engineering department. There's a slew of other terms that are used for shipboard life and personnel, both officers and crew. But you have a branch of military now controlling the licensing aspects of civilians. In my position, I'm a naval officer serving in the Merchant Marine, so I'm especially trained on these topics. And what the Coast Guard has done is abridged a number of clear lines of separation of power issues to where now this would be similar to having the Air Force enforce the FAA or take over the FAA and or license commercial and private airline pilots. If you look at what has happened since 9/11 or on the day of 9/11, the events of 9/11 were brought about by planes, aircraft, jets going into the two World Trade Center buildings and the Pentagon and the other plane that went down in Pennsylvania. Those were planes, not ships. But we've not had the Air Force come in and take over aircraft or civilian or commercial air travel here in the United States and or abroad. But what has happened since 9/11, and it was consummated in 2003 after Homeland Security was first created, and then Tom Ridge was walking around trying to figure out if he actually had a job or not, because Homeland Security was created by an executive order and then followed up by an act of Congress a year later. In 2003, when the Coast Guard moved into Homeland Security, it normally, in a declared war, would move under the Department of Defense and under the Department of the Navy, and it would then, and its personnel, whoever would attach to the Navy, come under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, or Title 10, which is military law. And our constitutional or our military law is constitutional here in the United States, where you are still presumed innocent. But what has happened is that the Coast Guard is running drumhead or kangaroo courts as military tribunals, and I've experienced these trials myself, to where the prosecutor is a JAG officer, Judge Advocate General Officer in the Officer Corps, in uniform of a special or self-declared branch of military, and not a branch of military that's in the Department of Defense, but is now in Homeland Security. They are using retired lieutenant commanders from the Coast Guard as the judges, and the judge has an assistant who's an attorney who is ex-Marine Corps, and they are dragging in both licensed officers and individuals like myself as a naval officer and a crew of American flag vessels. And this is the Coast Guard has done more to attack American flag shipping and American flag federal maritime officers and crew than any foreign Royal Navy has done in the last 200 years. The Coast Guard is also not only carrying on the licensing, but it is collecting the taxes or fines or fees for the licensing. It is doing this as a branch of military. This would be like having the Army collect your DMV fees for your automobile from you, which is as unconstitutional as one cares to imagine. In the military tribunals that they are carrying on, which is also another unlawful or improper form of taxation, the Coast Guard has converted constitutional military law, where you are presumed innocent, into Napoleonic, which goes to empire, Napoleonic law, to where you as an individual brought before these drumhead or kangaroo courts is presumed guilty. They have a 97 to 98% conviction rate. I have experienced these tribunals, military tribunals myself. These are the transcripts in electronic format for a trial that went on May 20th to the 23rd, 2008 in Long Beach, California at the Glenn Anderson Federal Building, or the Fusion Center as they now call it, the Federal Fusion Center, where many federal agencies have combined their resources into one building, and the separation of powers issues, or separation of duties as well, have been dissolved, to where many of these agencies are one in the same, to where even issues of fraternization, which is where you have, in like say the Navy as an example, you don't allow, and to the point of to where you will discharge individuals who violate this, you do not have officers sleeping with and or getting married to crewmen. There has to be some separation of power between not only the officers and even amongst the officers as to individuals within the same command, because it goes to conflicts of interest, but also between the officers and the crew. And this is being broken down in the fusion centers, to where all of these different individuals from all of these different agencies are working in the same building and even working out in the same gym. It may be good for camaraderie, but the problem is that with human nature, the issue of separation of powers was set up for a reason, which again goes to conflicts of interest. The Coast Guard is also taxing boat owners and not only imposing taxes upon civilian and or commercial boat owners and even fishermen, but is collecting the taxes as a branch of military. This is in violation of the Third Amendment. We've seen what has happened to the Constitution in the last 10 years. People are not carrying on a closer analysis of these issues, and the Coast Guard has taken over the EPA, the Environmental Protection Act, which is supposed to be the purview of a civilian agency. Admiral Allen, the current U.S. Coast Guard Commandant, and others work to take over FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and bring it under the auspices of, first and foremost, it's supposed to be an independent agency, under Homeland Security and under the control of the Coast Guard as a branch of military. When you start to look at some of these issues, like having the Department of Homeland Security, and when you really analyze this issue, it's not only redundant because we have a Department of Defense and we had a Department of Defense. Now what has been created is a new Department of Defense and Homeland Security, and the Department of Defense that we have had since World War II that used to be called the Department of War prior to, through, and up till just after World War II, and it was converted into the Department of Defense because of the outcome of not only the Nuremberg trials, but the Geneva Conventions that said no wars of aggression. And what has happened is our Department of Defense is being converted into a Department of Offense or Department of War, and Department of Homeland Security is being converted into a Department of Defense. And what has happened is the Coast Guard is the spearhead for much of this, and individuals like Admiral Loy, Admiral Collins, Admiral Allen, who's the current U.S. Coast Guard Commandant. Admiral Loy was the former U.S. Coast Guard Commandant. He took over the TSA, the Transportation Security Administration, and he is now working for Lockheed, where he has gotten a great deal of shares from Lockheed, and he has a great pension from the United States government as an admiral. But he has set up the situation to benefit not only Lockheed but a lot of other federal contractors, because now the Coast Guard, when it moved into Homeland Security, and this has been consummated effectively by Admiral Allen, the current U.S. Coast Guard Commandant, to take military law, Uniform Code of Military Justice, Title 10, out of the Department of Defense that it was written for specifically after World War II for all the branches of the military within the Department of Defense. And this goes to Supreme Court cases. It goes not only to posse comitatus. Right now the GAO, Government Accountability Office, is coming out and saying that posse comitatus does not somehow apply to the Navy and or the Coast Guard. Well, the Coast Guard was not around when the law was passed in 1872. The Coast Guard was not formed until 1915. But the Uniform Code of Military Justice did take into consideration posse comitatus and apply it to all branches of the military, including the Navy, but not the Coast Guard, because the Coast Guard is not, was not, and is not intended to be a branch of military. What has happened is the National Defense Industries Association, NDIA, has now awarded it's an association of 1,365 federal military contractors like Lockheed, General Dynamics, and others, who have awarded Admiral Allen effectively for taking a branch of civil service, just like the FBI, just like your local police force, and turning it into a branch of military overnight so that they can sell drones, cutters, all sorts of military hardware and software to the U.S. Coast Guard as if it were a branch of military. This is not a good thing. There are other changes, and when you start to look at who Admiral Allen is and who he is tied to, it is a bunch of corporatists, or as the term is used, fascists, who are using their positions within government and or corporations to create the need, regulate it, pass legislation for it, like No Child Left Behind is one perfect example, and then spin off a company, privatize it, use their position and power as within the government to contract out to their friends and or even family members to start a corporation. And this is fascism on a grand scale. It's what we fought against in World War II. And then create the need and give it to themselves. Well, I won't go into that. I was going to give a perfect example of this and how it's used is WD-40, or water displacement formula number 40, to where this was developed by the U.S. taxpayers, and now the formula is owned and controlled by a private family and or corporation, to where the taxpayers are not getting the royalties, and this is the issue that is addressed in many of these issues is the issues of royalty, to where we have individuals who want to either set themselves up as kings and or queens here in the United States and or are tied to foreign royal families in the old world Europe and even in Asia, including China, who use the government to create business, and specifically for themselves and to benefit themselves, which is such a violation of the public trust. WD-40, rather than paying the royalties back to the United States government for developing this and using those funds to develop more products like this and giving the family a leg up on others for bringing it to market the first time, allowing them to make a good living off of it, and then opening it up so that any others can use the same formula and take it to market under a different label or a different name. That's how our system was set up, so it would not specifically favor an individual family on into perpetuity, because that is royalty. But to give those who were more creative, more ingenious, the means and even some level, small level of protection for bringing a product first to market. The problem with this is the conflicts of interest between having someone within the government who has access to the formula like WD-40 and giving it to a specific family rather than putting it up for auction or bid. There are other issues with the Coast Guard, and you can look into Integrated Coast Guard Systems, ICGS. It's tied to Lockheed, it's tied to Admiral Loy. There's been such a level of corruption going on within the shipbuilding program. Another program is Tempest. But one of the most crucial issues is that now we have a civil service police law enforcement agency that is or has been carrying on its own little trials as a police agency, which is like having the sheriffs or highway patrol carrying on their own trials, which I think anyone can understand how unconstitutional that is. But now they are a branch of military carrying on trials of civilians here in the United States. And you can't get more foreign, and you can't get more royal, and you can't get more unconstitutional than that. And this is something that has to be addressed, because the Coast Guard is the spearhead as an agency for this high level of corporatism and or fascism that has seethed into our country. And many say since World War II, they call it creeping fascism. It has become full-blown, full blossom now here in the United States, and people are standing up and taking notice that the very thing that we stood against in World War II is now deeply embedded within our own system, and we must stand up, because I think the latest budget for the Department of Defense is $660 billion. That is, and that's an annual budget that could be going towards roads, transportation systems, and not to, and this is another issue with the Coast Guard, they're coming out with the TWIC card. It's a Transportation Worker Identification Card. This is the new progenitor to the National Identification Card. Lockheed is behind this. It's a biometric card scanner, and they're using transportation workers like officers and crew in the United States Merchant Marine. They're trying to expand this to truck drivers and more, to where, and this goes even into commercial air traffic, to where you have to have one of these cards to gain access to get to work, even to the point where it will be used for truck drivers. The cards, I think, are about $130. They're being made by a military defense contractor. Lockheed is one of the prime players in this. I mean, you actually pay the money to this federal military contractor to get the card. They're about $130. That card will be the new national ID unless it is confronted and effectively stopped. And first and foremost, a federal military contractor should not be carrying on identification of civilians here in the United States. When you start to really look at what's going on with the Coast Guard and all things tied to it, they're now seeking submarines for the Coast Guard. They're now putting divers into Navy SEAL programs for the Coast Guard. We are being prepared, just like in the early 1900s, the 1912, and if you look at 2012, that is a target date. They are setting us up for World War. And this is not just about Iraq, Afghanistan, possibly soon to be Iran, Pakistan, India. We've seen what's just happened in Georgia. This is being carried out by individuals within the Bush administration and other foreign governments to benefit these corporatists or fascists who use war to take out their political adversaries, those who want to speak the truth, those who want to have government serve the public, those who want to keep in line the trust, especially large private trusts, use and or enforce the antitrust laws. Right now, the Coast Guard, Admiral Allen, is married to Pamela Hess. You've probably heard that name before or recognize it. She is tied to the, as an heiress, the Hess oil dynasty from back east. So on one hand, you have the regulator, Admiral Allen, who is head of the Coast Guard, not as a police law enforcement agency anymore, but as a military police law enforcement agency that is carrying on law enforcement of civilian laws upon civilians, who is in bed, you know, and you think of the Exxon Valdez and what happened with that, he is now in bed literally with a woman tied to the oil industry and oil fortunes here in the United States. And Pamela Hess is also related to Rudolf Hess, former deputy Führer to Adolf Hitler. Admiral Allen is German, has German roots. Many people coming out of England also have, even though they may appear to be English and claim to be English, have very strong German roots. When you start to look at all the things that are going on with the Coast Guard and marry them to other issues here in the United States, we have a bunch of German industrialists, just like in our own Civil War, just like in World War I and World War II, who have come in and have set up and are setting up shop here in the United States to prepare us so that they can make a killing off of the coming war. And this must be confronted by, at any and all, or by any and all means, on any and all fronts, to wake the American people up and the people of the world. You can start to look to T-Mobile. T in T-Mobile stands for telecom, and it's telecom with a K. It's a German corporation. Chrysler, which was bought up by Daimler-Benz, many people thought it was a merger or that Chrysler was actually buying Daimler-Benz. Daimler-Benz has now spun off or worked to spun off Chrysler that it had bought up into a holding company called Cerberus. Cerberus is the three-headed dog. It's the mythological dog that guards Hades. Why you would name a corporation with that name, especially with everything else going on. The Heidelberg Group is now here in the United States. It's the largest cement manufacturer in the world. We also have ThyssenKrupp. Thyssen and Krupp are two, they made warships and more, just like Henry J. Kaiser did here in the United States. And Kaiser is who, the individual who gave us Kaiser Permanente, the HMO, or Health Management Organization. We have individuals like ThyssenKrupp who built warships in Germany who have now won the elevator contract for the new Freedom Tower at the World Trade Center in New York. Thyssen and Krupp are two very old families in German industrialists who have now married together the two families, and they have also, interestingly enough, married their family into the Habsburg family. The Habsburg family has controlled, that's a royal family from Europe, from, it's actually throughout not only Spain, Italy, England, Germany, Switzerland, and a lot of other areas, and they're not all under the Habsburg name. There's offshoots to it that have taken on other names. The Habsburg are a royal family, and they are setting us up, and much of what is going on and this coming war is to put down not just the people of the United States, but to put down the people of the world back under a feudal system, a royal system, where we once again have kings and queens who will use their guillotines or their weapons of choice against not only the American people, but the people of the world. When you start to look at the growth of the military-industrial complex and what is going on here in the United States, please look specifically at the U.S. Coast Guard and what it is doing in carrying on military tribunals under Napoleonic law here in the United States of American civilians when our civil courts are supposedly or allegedly open here in the United States. This is not only unconstitutional, this is unconscionable that this is going on in the United States. And you need to be very clear, our civilian population should not come under, and that's why we have for like a military installation, a federal reservation, to where we have not only the troops, but their armor and vehicles and tanks and more weaponry on a federal reservation or federal institution where it's a preservation to an extent, to where they are there for a reason and they are not supposed to interact with the civilian population except in an extreme emergency, which is an all-out war, which we have not had since, or even 2001 with the incidents of 9/11. These individuals, many of them involved, and this started back with Ronald Reagan, George Herbert Walker Bush, Henry Kissinger, Greenspan, Colin Powell, Norman Schwarzkopf, Rudy Giuliani, have all been knighted by the Queen of England. And when you start to look at the royal family ties and just the activity of these individuals like Admiral Allen, you start to realize that these are revolutionary times. We have stepped back 200 years to where we must once again declare our independence from these old world royal families. Thank you. This has been In the Zone. My name is Lieutenant Eric Shine.
Questions of much graver and universal interest occupy our minds today.